It's always wonderful. I've spoken to 2 Rotaries, and I love coming here because you all have so much fun. You don't take yourself quite so seriously as other groups who I speak to, but thank you for inviting me to come here today. I'm also the daughter of a small businessman on the Cape. My dad was one of the Cape's best ornamental blacksmiths for years. He owned Packet Landing Iron, and he's retired, but this year he's turning 90. But he's a great great model. Anyway, I am an author. I'm also a professor of language and early literacy at Lesley University. I'm a proud parent of a senior at Sturgis West. And I've also taken 10 years to write this book, and also was rejected 21 times from 21 different publishers. So I wrote this book. It's a children's book for parents, actually. And I wrote this book for parents for 2 very compelling reasons, which I'm going to share with you. The book was published late in 2013. I'm the self-publisher, and I'm happy to announce that my publishing model is where I enroll corporate sponsors or donors to print the book and then donate it to the groups of their choice. So the book has now been printed by 2 birthing hospitals, one in Rhode Island, one in Massachusetts, and I'm happy to say that 9,000 of these books are now being donated to mothers and newborns at 2 birthing hospitals. So my intention in 2014 is to get some of our Cape Cod mothers at Cape Cod Hospital to get these books, as well as translated into Spanish. Not so much a need for the Cape, but there certainly is a growing demographic of Spanish young families in other cities in Massachusetts. So I'm going to be asking for volunteers in the next 15 minutes. So I'm really interested in you if you have a great voice, a booming voice, and you love to read to children. But in the meantime, I'd like a volunteer to read this next slide. Can anyone stand up and just read it? Yes. Is it Lori? Lois.
Read, print, and make sense of it, even if the spellings are all scrambled up, because you're using the higher levels of processing as your brain samples just a little bit of the spelling to recognize the words automatically.
Excellent. That was excellent. So you have just really demonstrated the magnificence of the reading brain, because, Lois, what you had to remember is that the English language has 26 letters, but they make 44 sounds, and 19 of those sounds are vowels, and there are only 5 vowel letters. So it's not an easy thing to learn how to read. So thank you for demonstrating how a working reading brain can look at gobbledygook and in milliseconds read it for how it's originally intended. But not so many children have an easy time learning to read. In fact, many children struggle with learning to read. This is a national statistic. 66% of our 3rd graders are not reading on grade level or are not proficient in reading. And why is this important? 3rd grade is an incredibly important benchmark in our children's lives, because in kindergarten, 1st and 2nd grade, they are learning to read, and in 3rd grade, they are reading to learn. If you remember your children, or when 3rd and 4th grade came around, they had social studies books, they had science books, they had geography books, they had math books, and they had to be able to read those books. So that transition from learning to read to reading to learn happens around 3rd grade. And unfortunately, too many of our children are not making that transition. The other reason 3rd grade is such an important benchmark is that there's a link between 3rd grade reading proficiency and high school graduation. In fact, children who are not proficient at reading in 3rd grade are 4 times less likely to graduate from high school on time. And this jeopardizes their future to prosper in a global knowledge-based society. And it does not bode well for a literate workforce. Now, Massachusetts is a little better than the national average, but look at this. 43% of our 3rd graders are not reading on grade level, and when we look at low-income children, That's 65% are lagging. Now, this is not necessarily true in Barnstable or on the Cape. Different cities and towns have their own averages, which look better, but this is an aggregate average for Massachusetts. This also represents a 4% decline since 2012. And the other startling statistic is that in 2012, Massachusetts led the nation in third grade reading proficiency. We were doing the best, and this is all we're doing. So we're happy that we're doing so well in Massachusetts, but we have a long way to go. And that's the first reason I wrote this book, is because of the state of the art in reading. The second reason I wrote this book, and I really hope you can see these slides because this next one is great. The second reason I wrote this book is because what we have learned about how the brain gets wired to learn to read. What Lois was able to demonstrate is that she has a working reading brain, but that brain started to form in infancy, in language, when she interacted with the important people in her life. So consider this slide. The typical brain triples in size the first 2 years of life. Triples. This is a slide from Dr. Dimitri Christakis. The brain doesn't grow any new brain cells. When the baby's born, there are no new brain cells that grow. What grows are the synapses, the connections, the wires in between and among all the brain cells. And these wires form as a result of early experiences. So in order for these synapses, these connections to grow, the baby must be interacting with the important people in his or her life. And there must be responsive adults responding to the baby, even before the baby can talk. So those synapses can not only grow, but they can strengthen. Another way of looking at this, and I hope you can see this, but over here is the weight of the brain, the weight in grams. Over here is age in years. Now that's newborn all the way to 81 to 85 years old. So you can see how the changes in the brain decrease over time. So this is why we forget where our keys are. It peaks. It's not. You can see the rate between 0 and toddlerhood. This is 1. This is 2. This is 3. The rate of growth is the fastest in the first 2 years. And yet, public investment in the first 2 years is at its lowest point. We don't invest here. Why? Because mostly babies are home with their parents before they go to school. But it's the period of time when the brain is most malleable, most resilient, most vulnerable. But there's a huge window of opportunity for parents and grandparents, I should say, to help babies form the language and literacy synapses in the brain that will later serve the child in learning to read. In 1995, 2 researchers published the results of a decade-long study that recorded how much families conversed in the home with their babies and toddlers. 10 years it took them to collect this data. The researchers found a close correlation between, and listen carefully, the number of words a child's parents had spoken to him by the time he was 3 and his academic success at 9. At 3, children of more educated parents have heard 30 million more words than children from impoverished backgrounds. And this is what keeps children from arriving in kindergarten being able to learn how to read, is that they have lacked the stimulation, the language, the vocabulary, and the interactions with the important people, so that they're already behind in kindergarten. One more way of looking at the same concept. As you can see can see how the rate between 1 year and 2 years, and even 3 years, is so vast, and that it starts to even out when the brain is only 5 years old. It's not that we can't learn new things, but the rate of development slows down, which is why it's much harder for us to learn a second language as an adult. You teach a child a second language around here, they get it like that. It's because the brain is so wonderfully malleable. So children who fall behind here, because they're not being spoken to, they're not being read to, fall behind here in early literacy and language skills, and then they fall behind in reading. Remember this slide, and they end up here. They don't get to reading proficiency. It's like a domino effect. So my last slide before we actually read a book together. This is critically important, and it's really important to understand that the way we learn because we're social beings, and babies and toddlers and preschoolers learn inside of relationships with the important people in their life. Why? Because of the importance of the reciprocity of the relationship, the back and forth. There's a great analogy told to me by Dr. Jacques Shankoff about baby birds and mother birds. The baby birds are tweeting, tweet, 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 tweet. The mother birds are tweeting, tweet, 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 tweet. And the mother birds are teaching the baby birds how to tweet, and it's going back and forth, tweet, tweet, tweet. And the researchers were studying this. And they took the mother bird away from the baby birds, and they exposed the baby birds to a recording of the mother bird's tweets. A recording. Exact mother bird. And the baby birds stopped tweeting. And it's not because they didn't see the mother bird. Anybody want to venture a reason why the baby birds stopped tweeting, even though the recording was the exact replica of the mother's sounds? No, somebody said it. No interaction. There was no back and forth. There was no attachment. There was no bond. And I say this slide because I'm so convinced that we need to be careful about it used to be television, now it's screens, now it's videos, now it's iPads. We need to understand that those technologies are limited in their ability to build skills in young children unless they are experienced jointly between the child and the important person. Unless there's interaction, unless there's back and forth language, those technologies have limited ability to build skills in children. So, those are the two reasons I wrote this book. I wrote this book because of the grim state of the art of reading at the 3rd grade in Massachusetts and the rest of the country, and because we've got to take advantage of this critical period of development in children, especially the first 2 years, so that we can help build the foundation for reading. So what I did is I wrote a story. I'm going to ask 13 of you to come up here, and 6 of you to take a seat, and 6 of you to stand behind the table. And it's going to take 6 minutes to read a story about how one little girl learned to read from infancy through toddlerhood and through 1st grade when she's able to read a letter from her mother. The story is my story. The story is my daughter's story. It's authentic and it's true. And the story is also under the underbelly of the book is the science and the brain research that I've just mentioned to you here. So, may I have 16 volunteers who love to read? And you'll only have to read 1 page. I promise you, it won't take very long, but it's much more fun when you all do it. And I love the Rotary.
How about the Rotary readers coming?
The Rotary readers. Yes.
Once upon a happy time, in a village near the sea, there lived a child named Eva, and that child belonged to me. I longed for her to love to read, and yet you were so small. All the same, I'd read to you. You didn't mind at all.
And even though you could not talk, you'd start a conversation. I'd chat with you. You'd make soft sounds, exchanging information.
You loved it when I rubbed your skin. Ooh, ooh, softly coo. And smiling down upon your face, I coo right back to you. I know you loved your picture books, and sometimes, best of all, the stories I would tell of you, or me, when I was small. It made me sad to leave for work. We'd cry and wave, bye-bye. Then Mrs. Kwong would read to you, and soon your eyes would dry.
But one fine day, at 2 years old, I heard you squeal and shout. The puppy chewed your favorite book before I pulled it out. No, no, you said, it's mine. No sniff, no smell, no doggy lick. Up on tippy toes, you reached so high to keep your book away from Gracie's nose.
Sometimes you'd sit so quietly until the book was done, but other times you'd scamper off. There's Ava, on the run. I'd wait till you were sleepy, hugging baby sheep, then read to you your favorite book until you fell asleep.
And oh, the days the family came with books to read and keep. So sweet was Grandma's gentle voice, but Papa's rough and deep. And as for me, I'd read my books and look at you to see that you pretend to read yours too, so you could be like me.
And when you were 3 years old, you learned that words could rhyme. At 4, you learned the words have parts, an early reading sign. So at the store, we played with words like cookie, looky me, and apple. Well, it has 2 parts, and banana has 3.
I showed you letters in your book. To you, they look like squiggles. I gave you lots of paper then and watched your pen make wiggles. Your scribbles soon began to look a little like some letters. You made them twist and turn around and practiced them better.
At 5, you learned to print your name. I was so proud of you. We set off to our library, a splendid thing to do. Your card was such an awesome thing, it didn't cost a penny. We borrowed books, some even taught, and never had too many.
Would you continue?
Sure. First grade began with Mrs. Frank, your time to learn to read. But sometimes it was difficult and you did not succeed. I watched you sound out letters and helped you all I could. With little words like cat and can and harder words like wood. You practiced, practiced, practiced. And some words you forgot. But as you read and read and read, the easier it got.
And I'll read the last page. So now you've heard this story, my favorite tale to tell about how children learn to read and why you read so well. And Eva is reading a letter from her mother. Dear Eva, I love you, love you, love you. You are my special one. My gift to you is reading. I hope it's always fun. Read when you are happy or when you feel alone. Please pass this love of reading on to children of your own. Love, Mama. Thank you so much for your reading. That was great. So I'm hoping to that this book gets into the hands of especially low-income families with young children across the country. Have lots of strategies, irons in the fire, but I really appreciate the opportunity to bring these messages to you because I know how committed the Rotary is to literacy and raising our literacy rates, especially looking at the 3rd grade as an important benchmark. So this concludes my presentation, but I'm happy to answer any questions.